So my talk today is about the proper pronunciation of the word GIF.
Yes! Salute this man! Salute this man!
That's not actually my topic. But that is the proper pronunciation. So.
Is that GIF? Did it say GIF? What did it say?
GIF.
GIF.
Okay.
It's pronounced GIF.
Jiffy.
Dot GIF. Anyway, Rubik's Cube. So, I chose to do mine on Rubik's Cubes. It was invented in 1977 by Erno Rubik. I don't know if I pronounced that right or not. It was originally called the Magic Cube, until 3 years later he renamed it. He invented it as a teaching tool to try and help his students understand 3D objects, and didn't actually realize he had invented a puzzle until he messed it up and then couldn't put it back together. It actually took him a month to solve it the first time before he finally released it as a toy that we know today. Over 350 million have sold. It's considered one of the world's best-selling toys. It's still popular today and much beyond the regular 3x3 that he invented that day. About me, I learned how to solve about 3 years ago. My fastest time is a minute, so not great, but decent. Those are the different cubes that I have solved. There are lots more that I have not solved, but we'll get into more different cubes in a little while. So this is the standard Rubik's Cube, the 3x3x3. It has 43 quintillion different states that it can be in. That's a lot. If you play Cookie Clicker, you have a slight idea of what that number is. And if you were to take one apart and put it back together randomly, you actually only have a 1 in 12 chance of being able to solve it. So if you were to take all possible combinations that it can be in, if you were to take it apart, it would be 12 times 43 quintillion. So that's even more. So these are some other cubes. As I said earlier, I have solved that one. I've tried to solve that one. It's harder. And then you can imagine that that one gets even more difficult. This is the record largest Rubik's Cube for Guinness Book of World Records. It's not technically the same type of a puzzle because if you see all the corners and edge pieces, which are obviously the corners, and then these are the edge pieces, they're not colored, so it doesn't have the same puzzle aspects as a Rubik's Cube. That's actually solving the centers on a large cube like that. Solving the centers is the first step, and then the next step would be solving the edges and then the corners. So it's really, this would be easier than a normal. Like people say that a 7x7x7 is harder than that, just because of the different aspects in solving it. So these are some other cubes, or cubes, I say, because as you see, none of them are really in a cube form. We have a 2x2x4, a 1x3x3 that does exist and it does turn. A 3x3x7, and then that's what a 3x3x5 looks like messed up, which is pretty intimidating. Yeah. So that's a pyramid, which I've solved. They're actually pretty easy. That's like a Megaminx, I think this is called. I don't know the names for those, but
So an icosahedron and octahedron.
I'm pretty sure one of them is a dodecahedron.
Yeah, the one on the left is. Yeah.
This one I've heard called a Megaminx. This one right here. I don't know if that's just his Rubik's name or if it's also a dodecahedron, but yeah, solving them is actually fairly similar to solving a regular cube in certain aspects, like certain algorithms that you can do on a 3x3x3 will also work on those. It's just you have to modify them to work with 5 sides instead of just 4. These are some other strange cubes. Never seen one like that. Be interesting. That's called a square one, and it's, as you see, it's just a regular cube shape. It's just cut differently. than a 3x3x3, and it causes it to change its shape as you mess it up, as you see on the left of that. That one on the end there is actually interesting. It's just like a 3x3x3, but it's for blind people. Instead of using color to distinguish the sides, it uses size, like the actual length of the piece. And so even if you're blind, you can still feel which side is which. So that's one of the ways they do cubes for blind people, also with Braille and stuff like that. So how to solve one? Not like that. And that's a general idea. It's just missing a few things. So there's a couple approaches. The main ones, especially for beginners, is the layers method. So basically you start on a layer and you just work down until the whole thing is solved. And then the other method that I'm going to go into is called building a corner. You start with let me see if I can kind of point. You start with this part. So you just take a 2x2x2 out of the 3x3x3 and you solve that, and then you build from there into a larger section that is solved. That way you actually end up doing less moves because you don't have to break what you've already done. As I said, the layers method is for beginners. It requires a lot of moves, but not very many algorithms to memorize, and they're not all that complicated. If you go to RUBIK'S.com and you do their tutorials, which is actually how I learned, that's the way they teach you, is the layer method. So the general idea of solving with the layers is you start by solving the cross, they call it. So you have this cross right here down to the centerpiece. So this piece, basically just, since the centers never move on a Rubik's Cube, you just have to get these 4 pieces really in place. The next step would be the top, solving the whole top layer, so that would be setting these 4 corners here. Again, if you want to learn how to do any of this, feel free to go to RUBIK'S.com, I recommend. And the next is the middle layer, so if this is the top, then it would be these pieces, and then the back one you can't see. Then you would solve the bottom cross, which is, if this was flipped over, it'd be down here, and then finish out the bottom by solving the edge pieces and then the centers, or the center edges. As I said, this takes a lot of moves because you're constantly, whenever you build a layer, once the top layer is built, you can't change anything in the sides without breaking that top layer. So all of the algorithms involve breaking that top layer apart and then building it back together with the change that you want, like setting an edge piece on the middle layer or whatever. So by the end, even though you're only moving a few pieces, you're doing much longer algorithms. So the corner method is non-destructive. You start, as I said, you start with a corner and you kind of build out. So once you have this corner, you can work with these pieces and those sides without having to break apart your corner. So it's non-destructive and it can be done in much fewer moves, which is a lot better for speed cubers, people who are looking to solve it really fast. On that note, actually, Google has proven, using all of their computers, that any Rubik's Cube at any state can be solved in 20 moves or less. They did that by actually testing every single possible Rubik's Cube combination and seeing how few moves they could do it in. And it said that it took them 35 CPU years on all of their computers. But they were able to test all 43 quintillion and prove that 20 moves is the magic number. Humans have done it too, it's just not as easy. So these are the record times for the different cubes as of Guinness Book of World Records. Yes. This is a video of the 3x3x3 5.5 second solve. If you can see his fingers moving, congrats to you. And yeah. There's actually records for the fastest robot solve time as well, and that one's in the 3-second range. So then, as you see, the 4x4, 5, 2. Yeah, 2 under 1 second. That's crazy. 2x2 is actually more difficult than it seems. You can't just turn it randomly and it'll just come together, but it does every now and then. Some people get lucky and just everything will fall in place. But that doesn't usually happen. So these are the stranger. Like I'm sure you've heard like people doing them blindfolded and with their feet. The blindfolded I think is really impressive because I mean you can't see it, so they get a second to look at it and then they have to put the blindfold on and do it from memory. So yeah, and then they have records for how many people have done blindfolded in a row. They also have the record for most Rubik's Cubes done in like a day, I think it was, in the 4,000s. So there's some pretty intense people out there. And then one-handed and with the feet is easier because you don't have to memorize it. And that's